Welcome everyone to the Science of Winning Votes Exposed, 4 Secrets to Data-Driven Success. My name is Liz Freyer and I'm with Melissa. I'm joined today by Chris Rowe, Melissa's Vice President of Data Services, who's going to talk about the winning mix of data-driven marketing strategies that are vital to getting out the vote and winning in next year's election. So thank you, Chris, for being here today. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you that we will be sending out a replay of today's webinar in case you miss anything, so watch out for that tomorrow. And also, if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them in the chat box at any time. We'll get to all of your questions at the end. That's all I have for housekeeping items, so I'm going to turn it over to Chris Rowe.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody today. We're just going to go through the Science of Winning Votes Exposed, 4 Secrets to Data-Driven Success. Once you have your voter list, you might be especially excited to get started. Before you do anything, you should definitely clean this list. If the supplier of the voter list says the list has been processed through NCOA link, then ask how long. If you've had the list for a while or the provider of the list is unsure, just process it through NCOA link. It's pretty inexpensive process to gain the most current and corrected information. Please pay attention to how the list was coded. NCOA link is not a miracle product that makes everything perfect in the back end. You have to decipher which records you want to deliver and which ones you don't want based on the codes provided. If your voter file arrives with phones and emails, I would try to get those verification process before you proceed with either campaign. Please trust our image is simply an artistic and symbolic rendering. Do not request permission from IT to go in the server room with a squeegee. And just because later on we'll be discussing more modern approaches to get in front of voters, I encourage you not to abandon more traditional political marketing methods. One of these traditional methods is mail. In fact, the mailbox is at lowest amounts of mail competition ever, averaging 2 pieces of mail per day. At the very least, this is going to be a cost-efficient way to reinforce newer channels. And to some demographics, this might be the most receptive way for them to receive information about your campaign. You can always modernize your mail piece with QR codes or dig deeper into clickable paper or Google goggles. Calling all callers. Political telemarketing campaigns have existed for a very long time and still can be effective despite less and less people having landlines. Albeit more rare, some districts still have a healthy amount of landlines. It is still another important bolt in the quiver you should not ignore. I've been asked a lot about mobile phones. The 1991 Telecommunications Consumer Protection Act is still in effect, and SMS was added to that, provided protections for unsolicited texting as well. For the United States, the caller and receiver are subject to a charge. In cases of traditional landline marketing, the charges are caller only. Also, the major cell phone providers have not released their data publicly. So the only data available is self-reported information, which can be inconsistent and inaccurate at times. Wonder Woman and Boba Fett have a lot of burner phones according to the data collected. Now, because of this lack of quality information in the mobile phone world, you may come across some large-scale data gatherings of recent. Google and Yahoo think you can't recover your stolen email address without a cell phone, but that's not really the case. They don't actually think that. But by placing that extra screen in front of your face several times a day might get you to cave, and many have. Some retail stores are asking for cell phone numbers as well. And it's basically a mad scramble to get better data and more of it. Focus groups and polling have also reinforced that even if you do successfully solicit a voter's mobile phone for calling or texting, you need to tread lightly. The vast majority of mobile phone users do not want to be called by the candidate. However, younger voters in the 18 to 28 range are much more receptive to receiving a text. Bernie Sanders used this method for many of his rallies in 2016. He would ask for people to call a number to opt into communications and stay informed. Once you did that, they could legally text you. However, many political advisors had noticed promoting rallies or shedding light on a particular issue was much more exciting and effective to young voters than asking for donations. Excess can be an unforgivable on text. And there was a political advisor, Laura Olin, also reinforced that in the Obama's campaign text message in 2012. Now, email is a tricky thing now. It actually can send messages on multiple platforms. So how do you reach a person that just has a cell phone, but take a softer approach than a call or a text? Smartphones have gained in popularity and now represent the majority of mobile phone users. With premium email append, you can actually reach their best email and essentially land on their cell phone in a much less invasive but effective manner. Our email append requires a permission pass email introduction with the ability for consumer to opt out communication. This is important for the fact that we can get hard bounces, soft bounces. It allows customers to opt out of communication and we can remove them from the list. So you'll have a much more successful campaign. It usually takes between 1 to 3 weeks to process the total file, and avoid the 24-hour or less guys. They're all over the place. And the reason why we want to avoid these guys is they're simply bouncing your database off of another database that has emails. And these have not been verified in terms of bouncing, soft bouncing, hard bouncing, or anything like that. So you're very much in danger at that point. And our email append has a deliverability rate of 98% or higher. And that's within the first 30 days of receiving a completed file. Consumer demographics, when executed correctly, can really help a candidate exhibit specific goals and strategies that help solve specific problems nationally or locally. This really creates a personal touch between the candidate and the voter. The politician does not need to have actual ideas, or at least good fake ones, to properly optimize this data. Broad and powerful messages are good too, but more specific, the more specific you get, the more real you get with as the person, and just not a name on the ballot. We personally started working with the Obama campaign in late 2007, and even though I can't reveal the specifics of the demographic information they asked for, let me just say the day I received the request, I knew what strategy was, and it was pretty amazing to see. Before that particular day, I had not had a single candidate go that deep into demographic data. He was well behind in initial polling before this approach, and even though demographics isn't the sole reason the campaign's performance, it had an extremely important role. Since then, we've had several other candidates and PACs come through with demographic requests, but not as many as you would think. It's still a progressive approach, in my opinion. Some of the valuable traits of a candidate come out of when you micro-target your voters with specific message. This illustrates community involvement and allows you to communicate a particular message clearly. It also assists in understanding the constituents' needs. Even though I'm using a national example in the graphic that is most familiar with this, can really dial into more local levels. It doesn't have to be a national news to be important to the voter. Maybe some new boat restriction was instituted at a local lake in your district, and you have a better solution to the issue. Append boat owners and boat renters to your list and broadcast your solution via mail, phone, and or email. All right, time to get social. Despite being a few weeks out of Thanksgiving, this segment is not calling everyone out to look down on their phones and ignore each other at family or group events. Perhaps we should address that in a future webinar. Time to get social is referring to social media for my intents and purposes. In 2012, when I first started investigating email append as a service, many marketers and political campaigns were intimidated by this new method. Those that got in the bandwagon early cashed in, and to this day, it's very effective. Marketing with social media is very new, especially with the ability to append handles. I am very confident this will progress in a similar fashion as email append. Political campaigns that are progressive in their thinking will jump on it early, and eventually it will just become a standard in terms of marketing to potential voters. Now, you just can't target voters using social media without being prepared first. You need to have handles yourself. You need a strong web page that attempts to get more information as well as political contributions. Also express some of your strongest and most appealing traits and stances on the website as well. Once you think you've created an appealing social media presence yourself, now you can start recruiting your followers. It will be a combination of using social media and also appending handles to voters so you can get in front of them more often. Here are some results from the 2012 presidential election in terms of social media scores, which are a combination of likes and followers. Other campaigns must also not ignore this channel. From city officials, district representatives, to senators can all make massive progress using social media.
Sure. Chris, if you don't mind if we stop really quick, we're getting kind of like an import of questions. So if you wouldn't mind stopping and answering just a couple. Our first one is from Jeff says, would you clarify what you mean by handles?
Okay, so our ability is if you have an email address on your voter list, you can append social media handles. So these are the actual handles for like Twitter, Facebook, and different social media areas. I think we have about 20 different social media platforms. And this can allow you to reach those voters on your list or in your district and get in front of them in these channels.
Perfect, thanks. Yeah, we had a couple questions asking, a couple people asking the same type of question. So if you want to finish up the presentation, then we'll get to the rest of the questions at the end.
Yep, and this is a page on premium phone append. Why premium? Basically, the number is updated daily instead of monthly or quarterly. We have fewer disconnects and lower price compared to all daily updated sources. Our premium email append is very important just because it does have the longer turnaround, which it really deciphers both soft bounces and hard bounces. And it also allows the users to get out of an email campaign if they want to. And we do not supply those emails, but we will flag them just so you know which ones opted out. And social media append, as I explained earlier, this is actually derived, and you can get it through an email address. If your voter list does not have email addresses, you can actually append the emails before and then get the social media handles after. And we have very strong data sources in the United States. This is actually globally too. We actually have global social media handles.
Thanks, Chris. That was really interesting. Like I said, we have a couple questions. If you haven't had time to put your questions in, please feel free to type them in the chat box now, and we'll try to get to all of your questions, or at least as many of them as we can before the end of the presentation. We have another question from Sam. He says, I know that do not call rules don't apply to political campaigns, but would it be possible to see what numbers are flagged for it?
You can. So it's you would be processed as exempt from DNC rules, but you could ask for the flag. And the reason why that's valuable to some campaigns is a good question. So they can basically see which voters do not prefer to be contacted via phone on their list. They can still do it if they want, but they can take other channels with them if they want. So that might be able to create a strategy on how to target specific voters.
Great. Our next question, how fast are your NCOA and customer demographic services?
Most of those are very fast. You usually get same-day turnaround on your file when processing through either service.
Perfect. How current are the emails you provide in email append?
These email appends are, it's updated constantly, so it's a daily update. The one thing that makes our email append service a little bit more unique is we have what's called a rotating priority record. If we have indicators that an email address is deliverable, we have that in the system, and maybe that's their Yahoo address. But if their recent activity promotes their Gmail address, which is also on the same record, it'll actually prefer that record. So it's kind of a rotating record. Even though the Yahoo address is still deliverable, the system itself is showing more action on their Gmail account, which probably makes it more likely to be their primary email.
Nice. Okay. Anyone else have any other questions? Chris, do you want to throw your contact information up just in case anyone shy and wants to ask you questions personally? We did have a funny comment. Maybe it's a real question, but someone asked, would you recommend your candidate to have a reputation for hanging out at the mall too much?
As an employee, I worked at the mall for 3 years, and I would say if you have a reputation at a store, it's a good thing because it could be good or bad. If you have a reputation within the entire mall, it's usually bad. So, and I have a feeling, I'm guessing, how that question was derived. And apparently the voters didn't think so.
All right. Well, looks like that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Chris. His email address is chris.rowe, ROWE, at melissa.com, or call us at 1-800-635-4772. And we'll be happy to answer those questions for you. All right. Have a great day.